Hey everybody, John Greenewald here with theblackvault.com. Now, it doesn't matter if you use social media a lot. I know that some of you don't use it at all, but there has been some talk in UFO circles about the NSA declassifying a new document pertaining to communication with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, I like to do these types of videos, especially when a lot of people come to me asking certain types of questions. In this particular case, a lot of people came to me and said, hey, what is this new NSA document? Do you have it? Can we see it? Can we break it down on this channel? Sure, I am happy to do that. The question started to come as a surprise to me because the document, I pegged it right away when somebody had first asked me. And then as more people asked, I thought, where is this coming from? Because I didn't really have any backstory from the questions. People were just asking me. And so after a little bit of research, I realized not only did it stem from an article in a UK newspaper, often referenced as more of a tabloid, especially with these types of headlines, called The Sun, but also the entire story got very much a big boost in exposure on Fade to Black with Jimmy Church the other night when he was interviewing Lue Elizondo. Now, I was surprised to hear that Mr. Elizondo would bring up such a document and a headline that was sourced to The Sun. But on top of that, The Sun was completely wrong with not only their embellished headline, which, you know, most of us who look at these types of topics know the embellishment is prevalent out there, but also the facts, which I'll use air quotes on, were very much wrong when it came to the breakdown of this document. And sadly, as a result, they were conveyed by Mr. Elizondo to Jimmy Church's audience. Jimmy obviously is very popular and has a wide-ranging audience. And so that exploded the conversation about this article. So let me go ahead and break it down for you guys, and that way you have a little bit of a backstory, you have the true history behind this, and you can make up your own mind. The document, let me just start up front, is absolutely real. There's nothing fake about the document itself. It's just being represented, and we'll go represented wrong. So we'll go ahead and go over all of that. So let me bring up the slides here and kind of go through some of the visuals to show you guys what exactly we're talking about. Now, this was, from what I can deduce, the root of the article. Mr. Elizondo had read exactly the wording on this, so I assume that's where he got it. I don't think there was anything else that was published on this, so I think The Sun was the source. And the headline, Life Beyond NSA Warns Aliens Could Contact Humans Through High-Frequency Signals as Experts Warn We're Not Alone in the Universe. And you can see here that was published, excuse me, I forgot my pen here. Where's my laser pointer? There it is. All right, so 15 February 2022. So from the recording and dropping of this video, just 48 hours ago. I personally like to pay attention to the articles that deal with this type of topic. I missed this. It didn't come to my attention until, again, Mr. Elizondo brought it up on Fade to Black, and then I started getting a bunch of DMs on not only Reddit, because there's a big thread on Reddit about this, but also Twitter and Facebook. It just kind of exploded because of that exposure. So this is the root. This is where it is, and this is the article. Let me go ahead and read a little bit about what was read on Fade to Black, but also what the article says a little bit more. The National Security Agency has warned that aliens could contact humans through high-frequency signals, as experts say, we're not alone in the universe. A declassified document from the NSA titled, quote, Communication with Extraterrestrial Intelligence, unquote, explains the various methods aliens could use to communicate. Advanced civilizations familiar with radio frequencies would likely understand this form of communication. We are not alone in the universe, reads the NSA document. A few years ago, this notion seemed far-fetched. Today, the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence is taken for granted by most scientists. What the article does not do, and on Fade to Black, I know Mr. Elizondo was asked by Jimmy Church for a chronological context. When was this document written? It was not stated in either the article or on Fade to Black. So I'm here to answer that for you guys as well. because it's not recent, although the article absolutely makes it seem like it's recent. Here it is. This is the original NSA document, Communication with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. The author was Lambros Kalamahos. I may have that pronounced incorrectly. I'm never good with names. And you can go ahead and read the document. I'll link it in the show description below so you guys can download it, read it. It's a fascinating document because it is a look back at what people were talking about at the time that it was written. And that time was in the 1960s. I'll give you the exact date, but here's proof of that. This is what this was a document that I had gotten through the Freedom of Information Act, formerly top secret. During the time that I requested this, I don't believe it was available anywhere else. It had never been declassified before. It was at a top secret level. This was an index of all the NSA technical journals. Now, very quickly, a technical journal, or the NSA's technical journal, that's actually the title. The technical journal was an internal newsletter, we'll call it, that was circulated to those who were cleared to see it. Not everything in it was classified, although many did contain classified information. So ergo, some of the journals, if not all of them originally, were classified, but they also held quite a bit of unclassified material. We'll get into that in a second. So in this long, huge document, I tracked down where the article in question was, and it was in the winter of 1966. That was volume 11, number 1 of the NSA's technical journal. Here's a little bit about the author, Kalamahos, who had authored it. He was a U.S. Army cryptologist. In essence, he was working on cryptology, essentially code breaking. He worked in signals intelligence in New Delhi during World War II. He was incredibly intelligent when it came to signals intelligence, code breaking, stuff like that. He felt that his experience and knowledge could play a role in World War II, which is why he, from what I understand, why he decided to join the U.S. Army and utilize that intelligence. And then when the National Security Agency was formed in 1952, he had went over there and worked for the NSA. The document that we've been already talking about, and the one that was published in The Sun, is not the only one that deals with this. In fact, there's quite a few that deal with extraterrestrial communications, extraterrestrial intelligence, and talking about alien messages, all of them talking about alien messages. Here's one from the spring. This is volume 11, number 2, so the next issue of the NSA's technical journal, written by Howard Campagne. Forgive me, names again. But anyway, this author that next month wrote something again about extraterrestrial intelligence and breaking the code of an alien message. What these were training exercises. They weren't actually talking about aliens or a received message. They were hypothetical scenarios that were given to those who were working within the NSA as a training exercise to see a quote-unquote alien message. It could be in Russian, Chinese, Japanese, didn't matter, or alien, but there should be some type of code to decode. And that essentially was what these papers were all about. There was another one by the same author. This was published in, let me see here, volume 14, number 1, in the winter of 1969. This was titled Key to the Extraterrestrial Messages. And so this obviously will pique anybody's interest when looking at those titles. And I have those records as well. Those have been released before. These are screenshots of that paper. First was the, in chronological order, was the extraterrestrial intelligence document. And then later published was the key to the extraterrestrial messages. And if you haven't figured out the connection between the two, is that he decoded the exercise. The first one was the coded message that this particular author was publishing to have decoded, essentially, again, a training exercise. And the next time that they called back to it, you can see here, there were 29 messages in that original article, and this was the key for breaking it all down, and so on. Now back to the original one, the communication with extraterrestrial intelligence document, the first of the 3 that we've been chatting about. Here's the original Freedom of Information Act letter. in 1996 when I originally got that document. So this has been out there floating around on the Black Vault, even the original version of the Black Vault back in 1996. You can see the month there, October. I first started filing FOIA requests like the end of August, the beginning of September. So this was right there when I had started and got this big batch of NSA documents. You can still download all of those on the Black Vault. The PDF is below. It's page 107, if I remember correctly, where you'll see this document in question. My point in pointing all of that out is to show that this document is not new, obviously written in the 1960s, but has been around this conversation for decades. And I don't even claim to be the first one to find it. As far as I'm aware, it was available for years prior, likely going back even to before I was born in 1979, 1980. There was quite a few different lawsuits with the CIA and the NSA. So around the early 1980s time frame, a lot of these documents came out that dealt with not only UFOs, but since this was about aliens and extraterrestrials, they connected everything, even though it was just a training exercise. I want to take this opportunity to answer a question on Twitter that's very hard to do in a tweet. But in essence, this particular Twitter user, Mossy Moose 2 is the handle, links over to one of the three documents, and you can see the URL there, but it doesn't matter which one. On there was a approved for release marking of 2004. And since I was talking about 1996 in this video, and also New York Post investigative and video journalist Stephen Greenstreet was talking about 1996, he also made a call back to the letter that I just showed you. There was some confusion about, well, why does this document say 2004, which is an excellent question. So here's a quick lesson. The document, again, that we're mainly profiling here, communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, you'll see here two versions. The top left version says approved for release by NSA on 10/21/2004, FOIA case 41472. The bottom left is the exact same document. However, it was released to be in 1996. No redactions. It was unclassified, as you can see. But what's the difference? You know, one was released to me about 8 years prior to when this approval was. The way that the NSA works when they have a document that's put into a digitized collection, essentially for review, is that it gets a doc ID number, DOC ID, and you'll see that normally in the top left corner of most NSA documents. I'll show you an example. In fact, I believe, let me just go back a few. Yeah, right here. This particular doc ID number. See how they work and organize their documents is that once it goes into the system, consider that essentially like a barcode. And so it goes into the system and it gets a number. If I'll use redactions as an example, if a page goes in and it gets document number 1 and the first paragraph is redacted, and then John Greenewald comes along and says, hey, I need another review, file a mandatory declassification review request and get it reviewed, and that redaction is lifted. That is considered a different version of the same document. It also applies if there's a different quality of the document. In this particular case, the bottom right you can see is not as good, clean, or clear as this one here. It was probably published somewhere else. It was likely a different copy, whatever it might be. But the FOIA officer likely found it, maybe wanted to replace the cruddier version. When I scan in documents, I do try and clean them up a little bit. So that probably isn't exactly like it looked. It probably was a little bit messier. And so it goes in, gets a new number. The problem with that is that it needs another quick review in some cases, lengthier review in another, to pretty much ensure that something wasn't photocopied by mistake, that top secret photograph of an alien spacecraft didn't fall accidentally on the photo paper, the photocopy machine, and get photocopied out, you know, whatever it might be. But there needs to be a review to ensure that that new doc ID, which may be the exact same version of something released before, is still approved for release. So that differentiates between this 2004 released version and something that was released in 1996, but likely well prior to that. So just a little bit of extra information for you, but that's what those doc ID numbers are on most of the declassified documents or released documents that you will find. Going back to the declassified preface that the Sun put on this, well, the documents were never classified. They were always unclassified. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important for the same reason that many have stressed that these are declassified documents about communicating with extraterrestrial intelligence. Other references to it as well in the technical journal. Here's the author of that. So lots there. And I'll go ahead and link all those records down below as well. My whole point is that is what the NSA does. They create these either training exercises or really do dig into real codes that they try to break. Going back to the extraterrestrial messages, this was just an opportunity for me to kind of go into some history of a few documents that I got more than 25 years ago now. I feel really old saying that, but more than 25 years ago now that I've just kind of forgotten about. And I think a lot of researchers, when they get stuff 25 years later, unless it is world-changing, likely will be the same way. They'll forget about things. But I think that this is an important lesson for all of us. And of course, this won't resonate with everybody because I know there are some out there that hate me for, I don't want to call this even debunking. It's just correcting the false information that's been circulating about this. But it's a reminder that we, number one, can't believe everything that we read or hear, that we do have to take a little bit of time to look into the claims that are being made by either mainstream media or people in general or whomever it might be. But in addition to that, one thing that I keep seeing as well with this renewed interest in UFOs and kind of newfound approach where people are talking about it, we have to remember that a lot of stuff is now being recycled. And a lot of stuff that was, maybe bantered about 20 years ago or 25 years ago resurfaces, but with a different spin. And it's that spin that's very concerning for me. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to say, oh, this is getting a lot of attention now. Hey, let's dig this back up. And it was fun for me to, go to my original FOIA request, one of the original ones that I filed. It wasn't the first, but I'm guessing here, but probably my first 5, I would guess, first 5 or 10. But regardless, it's a good opportunity for us to realize, let's just make sure we take a step back, look at what's being presented and see, has this been around before? Is it being represented correctly? Is it being misrepresented? Is it being used for a narrative that may not necessarily be true? And I'm speaking generalized here, not anything specific to the documents we've been talking about. But again, great opportunity to remind ourselves of that. If you all have any